As we begin, I simply ask that you make sure your phones are silenced, and I also call your attention to the collection plates that are in the back of the sanctuary. Any gifts that you give will help to offset the cost of this series. Let us pray. O God, author of creation, we thank you for the gift of inspiration, for opening our eyes to see new possibilities, for enriching our minds with visions never dreamed, for guiding us to trust the unconscious view, for sounds to tickle and to delight, for teaching our hearts to receive the unexpected gift. For these and the many wonders you have wrought within the secret places of our souls, we thank you, O God of unfolding creation. Amen. This speaker series and lunch have been hosted here at St. Paul's for more than 100 years. But this year, we are pleased to offer the newly branded series in honor of Bishop John Shelby Spong. Together, we acknowledge his legacy, his spirit, and witness as a fearless, progressive thinker. Jack, as he was known to us here, was St. Paul's rector from 1969 to 1976, and after he retired as Bishop of Newark, he came back to us as a parishioner, worshiping in these pews and sitting right over there. A popular national lecturer, sometimes controversial biblical scholar, and the author of more than a dozen books, Spong was a champion of women's clergy, LGBTQ inclusion, racial justice, and interfaith dialogue. He taught us that the gospel of Jesus is not about rescuing us from a fallen world, but about calling us into a fuller humanity. It was the invitation to live fully, to love wastefully, and to have the courage to become all we were created to be. This speaker series will not look back as much as it looks forward to explore fresh and diverse expressions of progressive Christian thinking. And through that exploration, we hope to deepen our faith and strengthen God's community. Today's speaker is the Reverend Canon Stephanie Spellers, a priest, an author, a change agent, and a lover of souls. She is currently the canon in residence at St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church in New York City. A native of Kentucky, she is a graduate of Wake Forest, Harvard Divinity School, the Episcopal Divinity School, and has an honorary doctorate from General Theological Seminary. Her website adds that she is passionate about dancing and singing, listening and building bridges, and helping people to fall in love with God and be free. Reverend Spellers is the author of several books, including The Church Cracked Open. In that book, she urges us to reject self-centrism and empire and to take on the spiritual disciplines of practicing solidarity, stewarding privilege, and walking in love. Her most recent book is Church Tomorrow: What the Nuns and the Duns Teach Us About the Future of Faith. And part of what they teach us is that faith is trusting the Spirit to lead us into an uncertain future, beyond comfort and control, and into relationships, risk, and renewal. So we are about to hear a refreshing a progressive Christian voice and a rising leader in the Episcopal Church. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, the Reverend Stephanie Spellers, and our rector, the Reverend Dr. Charlie Dupree. And I have one brief announcement I have to do. If you have a Silver Forester license plate VJH 8092, we need you to move your car. Silver Forester VJH
Oh, no. Okay. Well, welcome, everyone. So good to have you here. Welcome to St. Paul's. Stephanie, welcome to St. Paul's.
Thank you so much.
How's
What
our
a
sound
pleasure.
doing? Sound?
Okay.
All right, the first thing I want to know is how is your trip here? There was a big old storm that blew up your way.
Oh my goodness, yes. So I live in New York City, and yeah, we got 18 inches of snow from Sunday to Monday, and then I flew out yesterday. And I managed to get, I think LaGuardia Airport had just reopened 4 hours before my flight, and they got us out.
And was it heavy people, a lot of people everywhere, crazy?
It actually wasn't that crazy. I think they had managed things. They knew the storm was coming. They took it seriously, and as long as this is a space where it's okay to be progressive, obviously.
Right.
So my thing was hey, our socialist mayor, got the streets cleaned.
Yes.
Everybody thought New York was gonna go, to hell in a handbasket. I'm actually, it's better than ever.
No.
Zoran.
This is the airport that was more likely to be affected by snow in New York City. Just because we heard about it, we might have shut down. Well, we're glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about what you do at St. Bart's.
Yes.
And what does it mean to be a canon for those who may not know?
Yes. So I've been now a canon for one bishop or another for 14 years, which is kind of wild to me. A canon, the easiest way to say that is that a canon goes boom. So I get to go around the church going boom. But it also means, and more specifically, canons are an extension of the ministry of a bishop. And so in 2012, I started as a canon to the Bishop of Long Island, which is the diocese that includes all of Brooklyn, all of Queens, and then the rest of the island. So a massive, incredibly diverse diocese. And then I started, and then I was called to serve as canon to our presiding bishop at the time, Michael Curry. Can we give Bishop Curry a hand? I know. Love him so much. So it was a great honor to serve as one of his canons, one of his 3 canons, for his entire 9-year term.
Wow. And
then when he retired at the end of 2024, I had told the incoming presiding bishop, I'm good. I'm dancing with the one that brung me. I said, I came in with Bishop Curry, I'm going out with them. And then Bishop Matthew Hyde in the Diocese of New York asked me to be a canon in New York. So I do a lot of work in the Diocese of New York on racial justice, racial healing. We've actually just issued a new report on reparations, and I need to say thank you to St. Paul's because your example for these many years, your truth-telling. I've been here before, actually, with Bishop Curry, so I know a lot about you, know your teams, have read through a lot of what you've created. You've been a blessing and an inspiration to me, and so I was honestly sharing the example of St. Paul's with folk in New York as they are figuring out how to move forward with their truth-telling and reparative ministries.
That's good.
So I continue to serve as an extension of that bishop's ministry. I do 2 Sundays a month at St. Bartholomew's, St. Bart's, which is another of the progressive cardinal churches in the Episcopal Church. Love St. Bart's. It's on Park Avenue, and south of us, right along the southern edge of the church, is the Waldorf Astoria. The northern edge of the church is a program for probably, I think, Midtown New York's largest program for unhoused and hungry people.
Wow.
So we are literally in between these extremes and trying to live out the gospel in that space. When
you talk about the margins,
yes,
you are the margin.
Yes,
you're the in-between place.
We are where the gospel is supposed to be, kind of living in between worlds and bridging worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as Bruce mentioned in his introduction, this is the John Shelby Spong speaker series.
Yes.
And I remember when I got to St. Paul's 6 years ago, it was among the first things I heard about. You know, you got to start this series, And of course, COVID happened, and then Bishop Spong died.
Yes.
And so this process has landed today, and I just want you to know that you are the keynote of the keynote. You're the first of this particular series, specifically because we think that you really embody and live out his spirit and his witness. So we want to hear about that today. But first, you have a bit of a connection to Bishop Spong, right?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Yes. And I'll share some from one of my books around this, but I am a convert to Christianity. And I had studied religion for so many years, majored in religion at Wake Forest University. I did my master's in theological studies at Harvard, but the whole time kind of kept my distance from Christianity. And it was discovering, I'll cry if I talk about this, discovering Spong's work, his witness, that helped me to believe that there could be a place for me in Christianity.
Wow.
At all, much less in the Episcopal Church.
That's pretty powerful.
So,
what about it? What did you see in his writing where you saw yourself?
It was so brave and so honest about what to me just was obvious. That, I mean, like the book in particular, I can still picture the old cover that I had in the late 90s, early 2000s, Why Christianity Must Change or Die. Folks know, I assume a number of people here know that book. I was walking around saying to people what I then got to read in Spong's words. And the idea that there was somebody who was a bishop who could be so honest about Christianity, its flaws and its hope, its promise. I just was like, okay, I want in. I want in with a church that can do what this guy is talking about. And so that was really, he was one of the first folk who helped me to bridge from thinking about Christianity to actually saying, yes, I want to be a Christian.
Oh, wow.
So being here right now, doing this inaugural, it is beyond an honor to me. His impact on me, my call to ordained ministry occurred in New York City, but I was very conscious that I was just across the river from Newark, where he had served. And again, I knew it was however stuck church felt to me and seemed to me just when I was looking at it, I knew that another Christianity was possible because Jack Spong had said so.
He unstuck it.
Yeah, he unstuck it.
Wow.
Actively unstuck it and made me want to be a part of that project.
Good.
Yeah.
Some people feel threatened by that sort of critique.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that you might talk about that as we continue our conversation because, Stephanie Spellers is coming into the room.
Right.
She's gonna blow some things up.
Right, the cannon, boom, right? Imagine if I'd had the chance to work with him.
Yeah.
Good God, what we would have blown up. But no, to me, it is, I think St. Paul's understands this, that there is a way that you can love things where you want them to stay exactly the same. And you have to hide from the truth about them. And if you've been in a relationship with a person, that's not a stable relationship. That's not a deep, loving, truly loving relationship, the one where you have to pretend how perfect they are. The real love is the love that says, I see you and I see where you're going. And I want to be with you on that journey. I see what's possible for you. I love you. I love all the parts of you. And I want to be with you for all of it. I got married the first, in 2020, actually, December of 2020. And I asked my then boyfriend to get married, to marry me. He was ready to get married. I was the holdout. It takes me a long time to figure things out. Again, baptized at age 27, married at age 49, But it was because I finally was like, oh, right. You don't express the greatest love by telling somebody how perfect they are. You express the greatest love by being with them on the journey toward what they were created to be.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I want to do the truth telling. I love, all of the truth telling again that you've done here, with your reconciliation initiative. I'm for that everywhere. And I wish every church could learn from your example, honestly, and realize that, you could keep telling one old story about the Confederacy and about Christianity and the Episcopal Church, or you could tell the truth. And you could be free. And you could get closer to God and closer to what you were created to be in Christ. And that brave path, to me, is everything.
Yeah.
That's everything. So I want to do that in every loving relationship I have, including my relationship with the church.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You want to get into your book?
Sure.
Yeah, church
Sure.
tomorrow. I think you have some things you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, I would love to. You were you invited me to think about how my journey into church, into faith, kind of intersects with kind of the story of Spong and basically how I kind of became a progressive Christian. And so I just wanted to share with you this new book, Church Tomorrow, is based on interviews that I conducted with nuns and duns. Nuns and duns are non-religious people. So they're the folks who, if they're filling out a survey that asks, what is your religious tradition? What is your religious affiliation? They would check the box for none, as in I have no affiliation. And many of them would even say they're not just nuns, they're duns. So they used to be religious and now they're done with it. So what was amazing to me, this time last year, I was on the road traveling, interviewing dozens of millennial and Gen Z nuns and duns. So age 18 to 44.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it was. And it was so incredibly inspiring. And it was partly inspiring to me because I was a nun for about half of my life. So I'd love to just read to you some about kind of my own journey into faith, which I think does intersect certainly with the story of and the witness of Jack Spong.
Absolutely.
All right. Confessions of a Former Nun. Clearly, I believe the road to the future church winds through terrain best known by non-religious young Americans. I admit I have a personal stake in such listening. As I write these words, I've spent exactly half of my life as a nun and half of my life as a Christian. Though Christianity was always close by, I didn't get baptized and join a church until I was 26 and a half. Avoiding Christianity wasn't easy, given that I spent much of my childhood in Kentucky in or near a Baptist church, majored in religion at Wake Forest University, a former Southern Baptist school in North Carolina, earned a Master of Theological Studies at Harvard Divinity School, and even worked as a religion reporter for a newspaper in East Tennessee. I was always deeply, deeply spiritual. I still dream about slowly walking barefoot in my granny's tiny but lush front yard, talking to God. My religious friends in high school in Knoxville, Tennessee, liked to say I was the most Christian person they knew. I was saved and publicly received Christ twice while singing in the college gospel choir. But whenever I looked at the institution of church, well, whenever I looked at church, I saw an institution, and I balked. I saw social control. I saw misogyny and homophobia. I saw greed run amok and comparatively little concern for the poor. I saw churches obsessively focused on sin and themselves. I did not see Jesus. Why did all that change for me? God opened my eyes and gave me Christian friends and mentors who took Jesus and his gospel of radical, self-giving love and justice seriously. And I would certainly call Bishop Spong one of those mentors. Just as importantly, I reached a point where I no longer craved infinite choice and freedom in order to flourish. Instead, I felt a dawning desire to grow within the context of committed relationship with Jesus and his flawed but spirit-filled church. I certainly can't assume mine would be the right path for every other nun or done. All I know is God met me and loved me in the context of Christian community. I will spend my life making sure anyone else who feels the tug can discover a community where they are able to grow into the full stature of Christ and bear his radiant love in the world.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love that so much, and it just blows my mind that every church isn't like the church you imagine.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's so intuitive to create spaces of flexibility and inclusion and creativity for me within the structure that we have of the
Clearly.
Episcopal. Yeah.
You're doing that
Have you
right
met us?
here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was most struck by the line that you have here. Just as importantly, I reached a point where I no longer craved infinite choice and freedom in order to flourish. I want to hang out there a little bit because I love a part of your theory is that privatization, secularization, we can get anything we want, we can do anything we want, we can buy anything we want, we can name buildings anything we want.
Well,
And
rename them too,
we can
apparently.
redo build. Yeah. So you get where I'm going with that. And it sounds like you think the place of institutionalized religion is about a type of framework. Yeah. So I guess what I want to hear is how do you balance that, and how do you hear others in all of these interviews you did? How do you hear them balancing or not balancing that need for some sort of discipline and architecture in their life, but then not wanting to be held accountable?
Right. So again, I interviewed about 45 young nuns and duns, so 45 people who are non-religious between the ages of 18 and 44. And these are generations who are surrounded by infinite choice. They can create, especially around spirituality, they are able to create what I call their own, everybody has their own bespoke spiritual bento box.
Okay.
In other words, they can kind of pick and choose and say,
a little bit
I
of
want
this.
some of this, I want some of this, don't want that, but I really like this, and kind of create this bespoke spiritual experience that belongs to them and them alone. And when you invite folks into a community, part of what you're saying is, I'm not just going to be able to pick and choose the things I love. I'm going to have some things around me that other people love. Can I love what the people I love?
Yeah.
You know, can I love it not because it's great to me, but because somebody else loves it? And that discipline is a part of community life. You know, the discipline of not getting everything you want.
Right.
And
even on a Sunday morning.
Especially on a Sunday morning. Note to church. Note to church. And so that is, unfortunately, that message, it's so it is countercultural in our day and age. There's something called, author Christopher Smith speaks of something called the millennial zeitgeist. Say that with me. Millennial zeitgeist.
I was going to get you to unpack that a little bit too. So,
yeah,
good.
exactly. And so a zeitgeist is the mood of a time. So the millennial zeitgeist is a zeitgeist that developed in America from basically starting in the 2000s. So millennial is in the turn of the millennium. And it is a very individualistic zeitgeist. It is a very multicultural zeitgeist. It is a very kind of consumer-focused zeitgeist. It is very kind of anti-institutional. It doesn't have a lot of trust for authority. It's very kind of anti-authoritarian. And the truth is that as I'm describing this to you, I hope you're beginning to recognize, wait a minute, this sounds a lot like baby boomers. Am I right? The baby boomers were actually the ones who really started pushing against institutions, started kind of becoming more media savvy, media as in television, honestly. That the boomers were the ones who started saying, I want a spiritual life that is very diverse and you can't pin us down. And so what's happening now is a generation raised by boomers are the ones who are even, like, they have doubled down on personal choice, on individual freedoms, on, like, don't try to make me commit to a community and a particular institution. So now what we're trying to figure out is, how do you take the children of baby boomers? And I'm curious, how many of you are boomers? That's what I thought, right? And how many of you have children who don't go to church? Precisely. It's, you did this.
Yeah.
You created us, basically. Like, we learned it from watching you, and so what we now have is generations growing up who are desperately lonely, but also terrified of being boxed in to an institution. And the challenge for church, the great challenge, the future of faith depends on us figuring this out, is how will we invite folk into a relationship with communities of love and invite the institution to serve the movement of communities of love, and not the other way around. Because if you're asking people to come in and serve your institution, it's a non-starter. They already see through it, and they don't want any part of that. They don't want to maintain your institutions. They don't want to prop up what they see as a dying way of life. But if you have a community of love that is willing to innovate, to be flexible, to be, again, all the things that Spong prophesied, like decades ago, that kind of church can still have a life.
Yeah. I remember one of my parishioners said about a church I served. This was in a college community.
Yeah.
And I love academic communities. She said, I knew this church was the right church for me because it was safe to struggle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So she was able to see that we didn't always get it right, that we didn't have all the answers. And I think that speaks to the notion of authenticity.
Yes.
And so, I know a lot of the people who come here appreciate that flexible space, the willingness to ask questions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the Spong DNA in St. Paul's. Oh, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So we have a little more flexibility than some other congregations, even in our diocese or in the church. And I just think it's about that authenticity. And is that a word that you use, or you've kind of dissected the word authenticity?
Yes.
You've broken it down.
Yes. Authenticity it's not just a buzzword for millennial and Gen Z Americans. It is an article of faith, I would say honestly. That being authentic, being true to who you are, and it can mean that it can just be a very individual and kind of personal thing, where authority rests in me, and as long as something is authentic to me, you can't tell me anything about it. I'd like to push that, and I heard folk kind of pushing the boundaries of that and saying, really, what matters with authenticity is especially if you can create communities where people can be authentic together. And that's a community where it doesn't matter how you dress, it doesn't matter what car you drove up in, it doesn't matter who you hung out with the night before. When you're being authentic, you're being real, you're being true, again, to how God made you. And what folks long for is communities where they can be authentic, where they can just show up as they are, and where they can ask those hard questions. And again, church so far, for a lot of the folk I interviewed, and I interviewed people who had grown up Roman Catholic, Evangelical, Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopal, Baptist, nothing at all, like all over the map. Mm-hmm. And to a person, these were non-religious folks, but to a person, what they told me was that they don't trust church to make room for that authenticity. They don't trust that church will be a place where people will be real. They think of church as a community where you have to put on a mask and fake.
Right.
And they're not here for any of that. So to have a church where people can be flawed and beloved by God is a gift. It is such a gift. And it is an unexpected gift. People don't even believe that church could be that real.
People don't expect it.
They don't expect it. So if that's who you are, you have to say so. And I heard them saying this to me. They gave me what I call 4 prophecies. Mm-hmm. And so half of the book, almost half of this book, Church Tomorrow, is exploring these prophecies from the nuns and duns. And one of the first prophecies that they gave me that I give to you is, will the real Christians please stand up? They enjoy and they preach to me about Jesus.
Right.
They know Jesus. They can give you scripture about Jesus. They like Jesus. Jesus is a big thumbs up for them. They think of Jesus and they're like, Jesus is the one who is feeding the poor. Why aren't you feeding the poor? Jesus was the one hanging out with prostitutes. How come you're so judgmental against everybody around anything to do with sexuality? Jesus was right there touching the lepers and being with people and healing. You only want people when they're well. What's up with your church?
Yeah.
And they see Christian, or I call it Christo nationalism, because I refuse to say there's anything Christian about what the Christian nationalists are doing. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So they see all of that. They hear all of that. What they can't hear is us. We're not loud enough. We're not bold enough. We're not present enough in the public square. We're busy twisting our hands, trying to figure out how to keep the folk who are kind of the red voting people together with the blue voting people. You know the maps. You see all the maps of the red and the blue, the red states, blue states. I feel like in the Episcopal Church, we're so busy trying to hold the red and the blue together that we've forgotten about the gospel. And these young ones are calling us to account on that.
Yeah, I remember there was a story in here from one of them who
Yes.
said that, why are you worried about keeping all of those folks happy when we're not really
You're
embodying
losing us.
Jesus?
Yeah,
And
exactly. They're telling me you're losing a generation of possible Christians because you're trying to keep people who don't want to be Christian in your pews. Sit with that. Sit with that. When we compromise the gospel, we are saying goodbye to a generation of people who could be Christian, but they need to see us actually living as Christians. And right now, we're so busy trying to keep everybody happy in our churches that we're trying to win that battle and we're losing the war for the faith.
Yep.
Yeah.
Powerful. As you were listening to these folks, I wonder, what did you hear people say they love? What do they love?
Yes. There was so much love. I have to tell you, I wept after some of my conversations with these young nuns and duns. They love the communities that they are creating. They love their families and their families of choice. They love standing up for folk who are hurting. There's so much protective love in their midst. And again, they won't compromise on that. They won't compromise on protecting the folk who are being hurt right now. They are fierce in that love. And they want to be loved. I got to tell you, when I was conducting these interviews, I was also, again, like I finished working for the church-wide offices. So I was a senior leader for the Episcopal Church, like the whole denomination, for 9 years. And when you finish that, everybody expects that you're going to go off and do a big job. So folks were like, where are you going to go and be a bishop? Or where will you be the cathedral dean or something like that? And I was actually in some search processes while I was doing the research writing this book. And these young ones, honestly, they yanked me out of that. And what I hope my next call will be after I'm done with the book conversations and touring. I feel convicted by them to go back to the margins and to create expressions of Christian community that answer the questions that these young ones are asking. And it won't be sexy, and it won't be big, and I'm not going to make the money, but I'm really excited about walking with these young nuns and duns to create forms of church, again, that I feel like Spong would recognize, and a lot of other folk are dreaming about. I'm ready to live more kind of on that edge and more into that innovative space, that innovative calling. I'm ready to go back to that. And they called me to it.
That's dedication. Having done, a small amount of research in a small area, I can't imagine the swath that you covered. It sounds like this is a good chance to move to the next book.
Sure thing.
Church Cracked Open.
Yeah, we're moving backward, I guess, in some ways. Yeah. This book, my baby, The Church Cracked Open, I wrote during pandemic, and I wrote it at the height of the racial reckoning in America. It was just after the murder of George Floyd. And I reached out to my publisher and said, I think I have to write about this moment because we can't get into our churches, but maybe that's a good thing. Because maybe what it means is we can let go of what our church has been. And in particular, we can let go of white supremacy, the white supremacy that's been at the heart of our church. And my God, nobody knows that, I think, better than St. Paul's, Richmond.
I don't know if when you walked in, there's still graffiti on our steps from the protest, George Floyd.
Good.
All of those names.
Keep it.
And we left them there specifically to keep it in front of us.
Yes.
But then again, I heard some people say, "Oh, a historic church like St. Paul's. You don't need that."
Right. And actually, you do.
Yeah.
Like the project for the whole church, and it's a project that I feel like that I wanted to explore, the idea that what if our church has been cracked open? And what if God is using this moment to help us to look at and be honest about the pieces of our common life that were rooted in white supremacy, and to say we don't want to put like when we put church back together again, we don't want to put it back together with white supremacy at the center. Mm-hmm. And we have a choice. Because the Episcopal Church, as constructed, is a church constructed with white supremacy at its heart. It just is. And again, I can say that with great love. I can say that with a collar wrapped around my neck. But I can say that's the church I chose, that chose me, really. But I can't lie about it. Yeah. I won't lie about it. And I can dream of what would this church be if white supremacy were not at its heart. And that's what made me write this book. Right. And it feels like an important conversation, especially to have here at St. Paul's.
Sure, yeah. I may be asking you to preach right now. I want to hear about the alabaster jar.
Oh.
That is one of my favorite stories, and I know you reference it in the book.
Yes.
And I want to hear how that resonates for you and what our work is about.
Should I read?
Yeah.
From this? Okay. So, in the midst of pandemic, shut out of our churches, weeping and protesting the murder of George Floyd and so many others, I came to this point. Casting about, searching for God's leading, my eye kept landing on one biblical image, a brazen woman with an alabaster jar full of costly scented nard in her hands. The story shows up in all 4 Gospels, but God kept drawing me to Mark's simple, action-packed account. Quote, while Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar, a very costly ointment of nard, and she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. Like most commentators and preachers, I thought I knew the story. Here was a woman who loved Jesus and sacrificed something precious in order to witness to that love. The disciples stormed and complained at her for wasting the oil and at Jesus for allowing her to approach him in the first place. I've always been fond of Jesus in this story. Not only did he refuse to shun her, he got sassy with them and suggested that his disciples needed to be more like her. Wherever the good news is proclaimed in the world, he said, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her. The more I dwelled with the story, the more shocking it appeared. Can you imagine the scandal? As she walked into a dinner gathering of men, hosted by a Pharisee, this woman carried a precious alabaster tiled jar of perfumed oil worth years of wages. She is the essence of disruption, hijacking their senses of sight, smell, taste, and decency. Already you can see she pours the nard onto Jesus' head. It flows down and down until it drenches his hair, his beard, his shoulders. Our sister has no interest in a stingy drip, drip from the jar's small opening. She wants the healing nard to flow onto Jesus like rivers, like power. And there's only one way to get that kind of free flow. You have to crack it open. Already you can see why the Gospel of Luke assumed she must be a sinner, and later scholars painted her as a prostitute. What other type of woman would be wealthy enough to possess this jar of perfumed ointment and bold enough to walk into a room of men? What kind of woman would initiate such a dramatic and sensuous, in the truest sense of the word, gesture? A woman of means, a woman with her own ideas, a woman to be reckoned with. While everyone else was freaking out, Jesus received her offering, thanked her for preparing his body for death and burial, and he promised that her extravagant, prodigal tribute would be remembered for generations to come. Finally, I imagine Jesus was relieved. Let me kind of move on down here. I want to sit at the feet of this sister and tell her about today, about decline, pandemic, reckonings, loss, and disruption. I want to confide in her. So much has cracked open. We have been cracked open. We don't know how to embrace this disruption, make the sacrifice, stop worshiping the beauty of the jar, and instead break it open so the healing substance inside can work its way into a world that desperately needs it. We are tempted to scramble around and gather the pieces and reassemble the jar and scoop up the lost oil. And we're really terrified we might be the jar, broken open by God for love of God's world. How might she respond? In my prayer, I hear her speaking these wise words, calming the storm, even as she stirs the waters. Listen. You and your church, you are holding a beautiful jar. You are used to grasping it with both hands, tilting and pouring the contents with moderation through a carefully crafted spout. Someday you will have to break it open so the contents flow free, or God will do it for you. You and your church, you think loving a thing means protecting and maintaining it exactly as it was handed to you. Someday you will understand what it means to love something enough to let it crack apart and just sit with the pieces. Notice what needs to be removed for good, and then faithfully piece together what matters most to make something more whole, something more like what God intended all along. Someday you will lose your life and gain real life. Oh, child, this could be one of those times.
All right. I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's anything else you'd like us to know. Is there anything else that we need to hear in this space, in this town, in this time?
Keep telling the truth. Keep loving out loud. Keep making room for the unexpected. Keep listening for the Spirit in the people outside. They have so much to teach us. God is not waiting for them to come in. God is working with them out there. You need to go out there and listen with them. And if you do, you will be blessed. If you do, you will be more faithful. If you do that, there will be a church tomorrow. That is my prayer for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. I imagine there's a bishop up in heaven smiling right now. Don't forget, lunches afterwards will be served. You can access the Scott Hall by going out these brass doors here and hanging a left, or going through these doors here. Don't forget, there is a collection plate in the back. And next week we have the Right Reverend Gene Robinson. So he will bless us with his story and with his presence. You've blessed us. Would you now bless us?
I would love to. I love ending my books with blessings. So here's a blessing at the close of church tomorrow. Someone out there will offer you guarantees, crystal balls, and a 10-point plan for success. Don't believe the hype. Here I offer the fervent prayer that you will go forth with curiosity and love. Go and be uncertain and vulnerable, and let the stranger host you. Go and ask questions you don't know the answer to, with people whose wisdom you have long ignored. Go and discover new elements of your own story, revealed in the fertile space between you and the other. Please, my friends, go to reclaim and proclaim a faith rooted in the life and love of Jesus. Go be real, embodied, and full of delight in the Spirit and in one another. Go free of the need to maintain what God never asked you to maintain. Go sit by the riverbank and sing your song. Go in blessing and discover God was there all along.
Amen.
Amen. Let's eat.
Stephanie will be in Scott Hall with some of her books. See you next week. Have a good one. All right, perfect.